Welcome to Prince Shorter Downs. Exercise number 13 or 14, 140 words a minute. Special dictation for Parliament reporter skill test. Be ready. Start. Ever since the beginning of the community development program, I have taken deep interest in it. It did much good, but it became clear later that something else should be done to give fresh vitality to our work in rural areas. This impetus was provided by the Panchayati Raj program, which was not only an extension of community development but was also qualitative, somewhat different. It also went deeper into the roots of our village structure. Therefore, I was deeply interested in it and attached great importance to it. It struck me as an attempt to strike at the roots of our weakness, especially in rural areas. The measure of success it may attain depends on the workers connected with it as well as a large number of others who are closely associated with it. To what extent it has succeeded, it is difficult for me to say without more detailed information, but I am convinced that it is working on right lines, and if the people connected with it realize its inner significance, its success is assured. On achieving independence, we inherited not only various psychologies and habits of the British times but also an administrative apparatus which, though good in its own way for the purpose the British government has in view, did not fit into the new order that we were trying to build. Many of our officials were well trained and good, but naturally they were too much tied up with the old order. We came to realize gradually that the whole outlook of our administrative structure has to change if real progress is to be made. In particular, it has to change in the lower rank. In rural India, the old attitude was no good. It had to replace by full identification with the mass of our people and a growing responsibility being cast on the people themselves. After all, the main aim of community development and Panchayati Raj was to develop this outlook and a spirit of self-reliance amongst the people. The fact that those people were quite often not attend and had other failings was obvious. Nevertheless, the only way to attend them and to lessen their failing was to give them the chance of shouldering responsibility and learning by their own mistakes. We have to undertake many development schemes, but the biggest project of all is to build men and women. We have met after a fairly long interval since January last. The last time we met was soon after emergency was declared in the wake of Chinese invasion. That emergency is still with us, though it has lost some of its immediate urgency, but we have to prepare to meet the threat which is still there. It is clear that even from the point of view of the emergency, it is of the utmost importance for our development work to go on. Emergency does not merely mean raising soldiers or getting aircraft. It means production for defense, especially all other types of production, more particularly on the agricultural front, is equally necessary. We have done many things which are creditable to us, but the overall picture is not one of fast progress, especially in the agricultural domain. This is rather distressing because agriculture is the basis of all our development work. If we fail in agriculture, it does not matter what else we achieve, how many plants we put up, our economic development will not be completed. Agriculture is more important than anything else, not excluding big plants, because agriculture production sets the tone to all economic progress. It is agriculture that gives the material for progress. If we fail in agriculture, then we fail inevitably in industry also. I am laying stress on this because in spite of the emphasis on this, it appears to me that agriculture is often considered a routine job, not deserving to be taken charge of by the brightest of the ministers. Agriculture is more important by itself than any chief minister. You may say chief ministers are all important in a government. Of course, from the point of the departments and administration. Chief minister's portfolio is most important. I should not be sorry if the chief minister himself took charge of agriculture. It must be done by a man with a sense of devotion to work with energy and enthusiasm and some idea. That is unfortunately not so now. In any case, that is not the impression we get. Progress has not been satisfactory even in regard to another matter, land reforms. It is intimately connected with agricultural progress, and as a problem it has been with us ever since we became independent. Indeed, even before that, nothing exercised our minds so much as land reforms. Most of the states, or nearly all of them, ultimately based legislation, but in some places its progress was held up by the courts until finally it was passed. In Japan, I believe the ceiling on land is 7 acres only. Next para. One of our state which is comparison to others in more prosperous is Punjab, where there is hardly any big plant but there are plenty of small industries. Some states which are full of big plants are low down in the scale of per capita income in spite of the development of industry, because agriculture is not developing. So I beg of you to think a great deal more about developing agriculture and as a part of the program of and land reform. That program must be completed after 60 years of independence. Our program of land reform has not been fully implemented for various reasons, and because of various pressures, this must be borne in mind. I hope you all realize that this business of planning of development is not a thing for each state to do by itself or for the center alone. It is an activity in which there has to be the fullest cooperation between the center and the states and between the states, because real development cannot ultimately take place in one corner of India while the other is neglected. There is sometimes an unfortunate rivalry between states over something or the other. Healthy competition is good, but this rivalry is not a good thing, and you must look upon this whole planning and developmental process as one complete whole for India, with the states and the center cooperation all the time. In the last 12 or 13 years, we have gathered much experience in planning through success and failures. I think that on the whole we plan well. I think also that on the whole we do not implement well. It is not good to have a theoretical plan no and not implement it fully. Plan development is a complicated matter which takes you right down to the lowest rungs of the administrative ladder. To some extent, I have a feeling that these rungs of administrative ladder are not functioning as they ought to. We have some very good administrator, but it is not good man by himself who can do much. The whole tone of the administration has to be improved right down to the revenue official and other officials. Sometimes there is a conflict between one department and another. Therefore, each state has to tone up its administration, and ministers have to give little more time to administrative work. One of the things we have learned from planning these last few years, and this has been stressed in the third plan report, is the need for prospective planning. You cannot plan for a year or even for 5 years. You have to think 20 years ahead and work up to those objectives. What happens is that we plan for 5 years as if we are going to start a new scheme of things at the beginning of every plan. There is no such thing. Planning is a continuous process. If you have got to do something in the fourth plan, you have to begin here and now, not of course spending large sums of money, but still laying the foundations for it, so that when the time for the fourth plan comes, it assured of a good start. We lose much time in the initial stages on any project. This is totally unnecessary. Therefore, I think in your agenda there is provision for the preparation of the fourth plan. Those arrangements must proceed now in the middle of the third plan. In the notes supplied to me, I remember to have read a statement that we are now in the middle of the 55 years of planning since independence. 55 years is an adequate time, and therefore half of this period is a good time to make an appraisal of the situation. I would beg of you to remember that although what you have already done is important, it is not very important by itself. An old factory or factories or something else you put up, you have to go to roots of the economic problem. The roots lie in agriculture and the enormous material in the form of 950 million or more people. The other most important things is training the people apart from top level scientists, technicians, engineers, etc. And we are getting more and more of them now. General training for the masses engaged in agriculture is necessary. That leads you to mass education. Education has no doubt increased. Unfortunately, I have heard that in some states the emergency has led to a slowing down in the rate of expansion of education. That I think is tragic. I do not wish to use milder terms because the whole progress of India depends on the educational apparatus from the bottom to the top. These are some of the things I should like you to bear in mind. We can't neglect education in case, because with that rests the future of the Indian people. Thank you. Stop.